Here to discuss what's going on in Springfield when it comes to public safety bills is Sheriff Kent Martin. He's the sheriff of Coles County. I happened to meet him a couple weeks ago and was down there giving a speech. Prior to his election, he served as the Eastern Illinois University police chief. In his annual report, which I found just fascinating, I found his 2023 annual report, which was his first report as a sheriff online. And I thought, this is a good sheriff. He started his report this way. I believe citizens have a right to know how their tax dollars are being spent and what their elected officials are doing. Great. My staff and I will strive to provide accurate, comprehensive information regarding the operations of the sheriff's office. As stated during my campaign, I will explain any line items that exceeded the amount budgeted by the county board. So I'm so pleased to have him join me tonight. I asked him on after listening to his his information that he gave at the same Lincoln Day dinner that I was at, where he noted that there were quite a few bad bills in Springfield. And so here to talk about those is Sheriff Martin. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining me tonight on The Real Story.
Thanks for having me, Jeannie. It's great to be here. Great to be with you.
Before we get into some of the specific legislation, though, can you give me a sort of a downstater sheriff's assessment of how the SafeT Act is performing in your county?
My county in particular, I did some number crunching the other day. Our average daily population in our jail was somewhere around 80 to 90, somewhere in that neighborhood prior to October of 2023 when those provisions really kicked in. In October of 23, that number dropped to, it was either 43 or 46. So we had a very significant drop when that first took effect.
Was that the effect of them having to reassess everybody as to the new laws and whether or not they could be detained or not? And so there was like almost just a letting go of some folks into the population?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay.
And when it rolled out, nobody really knew how it was going to work or how it was going to look, and it was kind of unclear. So I think there was a lot of just this thought of we have to release these people and then deal with them later. So I think that's one of the reasons why the number dropped so dramatically.
Okay. Great. And then what have you seen subsequently?
Our ADP gradually began to creep back up. It wasn't a real dramatic rise, but over time, it has gotten back up to about 90 to 100. I think last month's ADP was 98 or 9, something like that. So we're starting to see people who are, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, people who have committed offense while they're out on pre-trial release, or people who aren't showing up for court, now they're being ordered held. Okay, so that's part of the SafeT Act. You let them out, they don't show up for court, then you have to get a warrant, go back after them, find them, bring them back in, and you hold them. Right.
Okay, interesting. And your county's about the size of 56,000 or something, I thought.
Yeah, right around there, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay, so it's not necessarily an increase in crime; it's an increase of people being out and then being put back in many cases. Reoffenders.
I would agree with that.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, all right. Well, then I guess to some degree it's sort of working, although it seems like there's a lot more effort that has to be involved from your side in tracking down offenders again to put them back in. And it may prove up their case a little bit stronger that they're sort of a career criminal, but I don't know how that is perceived in the courts.
It's not sure how the court perceives it. I know how the public has perceived it down here. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of people who don't understand, why isn't this person in jail? It's like, well, it was because we weren't able to hold them, but now because they have committed new crimes while they're out, or they have finally had enough times of failing to show up for court that they've been ordered detained again.
Okay, well, so, they've done a lot on public safety. Every single session, they seem to do a lot on public safety, try and tweak it here or there. to me, one of the most outrageous bills, unfortunately, it's absolutely going nowhere, was HB 3518, which I know you also highlighted, and that was the decriminalization of prostitution. I think there's two sponsors. It went nowhere. Obviously, nobody agrees with that, so that's a good thing. But there were other bills also that were very problematic. What do you? Which ones would you point to?
I've got several here.
Okay.
I was looking at this was a Senate bill. It was Senate Bill 42. That had a provision in it where, and I'm quoting directly from the proposed statute here, if a motor vehicle is driven or occupied by an individual 21 years of age or over, a law enforcement officer may not stop or detain the vehicle or its driver, nor search the vehicle, the contents of the vehicle, or the operator or passenger based on the odor of burnt or raw cannabis.
Well, that is interesting, because if you smell alcohol, is that a probable cause?
Absolutely. If we smell alcohol on someone, I would consider it an obligation to pull that driver out and talk to them and try to determine if they're impaired, if it's safe for them to be on the road. I don't know why this would be any different.
Well, this one is concerning, too, because it actually did pass the Senate. And so it is coming over to the House. On your list, it's, I think, the only one that is moving forward. Now, the other ones can move forward, don't get me wrong. They can always reintroduce them, slap them onto another bill that's already passed, whatever they want to do. But this one got full support in the Senate, now in the House. How is this a problem for your officers and you and the public?
If that passes, it will essentially it will gut our interdiction efforts. When you have the odor of raw cannabis, for example, that doesn't tell you how much is in that vehicle. So if someone is trafficking, we don't know if they've got a small amount in there, if they have a large amount. Right now, you have to have cannabis in an odor-proof container. So if you smell raw cannabis, you know that's a violation. That gets you into that vehicle. By taking that away from us, it's going to make it extremely difficult to combat drug trafficking or the transportation of narcotics.
Well, and the funny thing is that they originally, when they passed the cannabis law, they actually wrote odor-proof containers into the law, and now they're backing away. So why? I mean, why are they doing that?
That's the big question.
Well, look, they're pro-drug, honestly. I mean, this is the same crew that, at least in the House, wanted to decriminalize all sorts of hard drugs only a few years ago, and they voted positively to do that. So I'm not surprised, I guess. Okay, what's next on your list?
Another one I had here was, this was House Bill 2706. It was some changes to the Illinois Trust Act. So, that covering immigration topics. One of the things that this bill was going to do, we're already restricted in that we can't assist immigration agents in any way. Mm-hmm. This would make it where we could not even provide any type of operational assistance. We couldn't direct traffic away from a place where there was going to be a raid, or we couldn't secure a perimeter and let the immigration agents go in and do their thing. So, we can't even provide assistance to fellow law enforcement officers and try to keep them and the public safe. It's literally hands off anything for that.
Yeah, it's sort of surprising given the backlash that's ensued in Chicago. Even the Chicago City Council was considering a legislation to repeal sanctuary city status. We should be repealing sanctuary state status, and these guys are doubling down. It's Lisa Hernandez, no surprise. Barbara Hernandez, absolutely no surprise, that are heading this whole thing up. And these are your Chicago Democrats. This has not received hardly any attention at all.
Well, it's I'm looking at it obviously through the lens of a law enforcement officer, where at least, it's bad enough that we can't enforce the immigration laws, but this would prevent me, at least as it's written, from even helping ensure the safety of a brother officer, or setting up a perimeter or diverting traffic away, having a roadblock. You can't come down this way right now. They're getting ready to do something here. You need to go to the next street and go over. We can't even do that to keep our own fellow law enforcement officers safe.
Hey, Sheriff, do you mind? We're going to take a quick break. I'm going to hold you over, and we're going to go through some of these other bills because I think it's really important to have this conversation with people. Join me this Sunday night. We still have Sheriff Martin, Sheriff of Coles County, on the phone with me. We have been discussing public safety issues, and, as a county down in Coles County, I just want to go back to one thing that popped into my head during the break, and we were just talking about the bill that passed the Senate, is in the House, and it would say that, you can't just necessarily pull somebody over or pull them out of the car or do a sobriety test if you smell marijuana in their car anymore, because they don't need to have an odor-proof container. That's a problem. Now, Sheriff, it's my understanding that a lot of the crime that you're facing in much of the smaller communities is related to drugs. And it is also interesting that the SafeT Act had a specific provision where a lot of the drug crimes were non-detainable offenses at that point. And so I know the SafeT Act went through a number of changes, but I think that was still the case where they're a non-detainable offense. Are you finding that these two issues are sort of really forcing you not to be able to keep your community as safe as possible?
Well, I think anything that throws an obstacle in front of us like this potentially could, yes, make things less safe. I mean, it makes it more difficult for us to get into a vehicle, to search the occupants, to search the vehicle, to find maybe evidence of other crimes that are going on. And there's really, like you said earlier, I loved your reference with alcohol. If you smell alcohol on the breath of a driver, they want us to take action on that to keep the roads safe. Well, I don't, what's the difference here? Why wouldn't they want us to take that same action if you smell burnt cannabis in a vehicle or raw cannabis, which the law already says it has to be in an odor-proof container. So they seem to be bending over backwards to legitimize bad behavior or justify bad behavior instead of just making people follow the laws that are already on the books.
Yep. Oh, yeah, it's always the case to, break the law, change the law. So who knows if this didn't come up and now they need to change the law. Speaking of changing the law, though, you did have a problem here. Obviously, the Anjanette Young Act, as it's called now, though, the no-knock warrant rules. You highlighted that as well, HB1611. And it's pretty harsh. It's really, I think, it ties the hands of law enforcement when they need to go in and be able to arrest people that are doing terrible things. Talk to me about that one real quick.
Real quick would be the hard part, because
okay,
there are just so many things. There's so many things that are wrong here.
You got about 2 minutes, so let's see what you can do.
Not even sure where to begin with these. I mean, probably one of the most glaring that jumps out is it would restrict warrants being executed during daylight hours, which basically is considered from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's not always possible. You got 96 hours to serve a search warrant after it gets signed, so now they're further restricting that. There's problems with, we like to do it earlier in the morning sometimes so we can get it served before people are on their way to work, people are on the way to school, there's less people on the street.
Hey, that's what that's what Biden's DOJ did when they wanted to go arrest Mark Houck at his, for praying at an abortion clinic. They arrested him at 6 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's some provisions in there that would require the use of either a SWAT team or a special tactical team. Well, that team's not always available. That team's not always going to be there. In fact, sometimes they're not even needed for a search warrant.
Yeah, so I mean,
bill is requesting that they're the ones that have to do it. It doesn't make any sense.
So, I mean, I wish I had more time to talk to you about this, but we're on a tight leash here. But to me, this is a really good example of, yes, bad things happen. Anjanette Young was harmed. She got over a $2 million payout. I understand that isn't enough, really. The humiliation, the fear, the PTSD that must result from it. I mean, it must be horrific. But in every single case, they come up with a law to prevent the next sort of thing that could have been prevented anyway had people just been paying attention.
That's very well put.
All right. Hey, I wish I had more time. Sheriff Martin, thank you, though, so much for bringing this all to light. Sheriff Martin, Coles County Sheriff, thanks for being on The Real Story. We'll be right